So I've been working for emergency management since 1995. I'm the longest serving member of the team. I'm the old man of emergency management. You know, so I came on board originally to manage this, I was originally hired for 6 months to turn GIS maps into JPEG images we were going to use in this emergency management application called EIS, which was based on a database called Superbase. Has anyone here heard of Superbase?
Yes.
Oh, you've heard of Superbase? Wow. I know, Superbase, I think people stopped using it probably around 2000, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
And then we went to an Access database, and then we went to a homegrown database I built myself out of ASP.NET and with an Oracle backend. But the problem with homegrown tools is they're really fun to build, and you can customize them all you want, but they're impossible to maintain. So then we bought WebEOC. The purpose of this talk today is to really sensitize you to the challenges we face in emergency management with regards to information management. I love this topic. I keep talking about this forever. You know, and we have 40 minutes. Normally I'm kind of a slow talker, but it just causes me to speed up a little bit. I'll try and get through all of my material, and I want to make this interactive, so I don't want to just, so there's a couple of slides that are really just big lists of stuff, and I'm going to pause and see if you can come up with, you know, as many of the list items. So hopefully we'll make it interactive. I don't want to put anybody on the spot. I've got some slides at the end. They're screenshots from our current WebEOC. So we can go through those if we have time, but really I want to keep it more general with looking at all of our information strategies or challenges. I'm not sure how many of you attended previous speaker series. I got those slide decks, and they're very heavy into the structure of emergency management, organizational structures. I'm not going to go through a lot of that material. As Jackson probably knows, I sort of did a brain dump for about 4 hours. So, you know, there's a lot of material to learn just about the organizational structures. So please, if I'm talking about something or I use some acronyms that you don't understand, just stop me anytime, because I don't want to have you be confused. Okay. All right. So here's the City of Seattle EOC. This building is the city's central coordination hub for information, resources, plans of action, and policy decisions in an emergency. So the mayor comes down here, major high executives in our departments come down here to make decisions. And so the people we want coming down here can make decisions for their department or even outside agencies without having to make a phone call. And so this is what the inside of the building looks like when we have a major activation. So you can see there's a lot of side conversations going on. We took a class at Texas A&M, and typically we divide up into different sections, and each section has their own color vest. And the Texas A&M people said they could gauge the success of any group by looking at how many people, different color vests, were talking to each other in ad hoc stand-up meetings. You notice there's a lot of stress eating going on. You notice my friend Erica here, who is staring off into space while Debbie's talking to her, and they're evidently kind of looking at something on a computer screen while Erica is stress eating. So that's pretty typical. And usually you could see, I don't know, a couple of cases. There's me. You know, I'm talking to Jay, and there's somebody getting ready to talk to me right there. So usually you're having a conversation, and there's like one or two people queued up to talk to you right after you're done. So that's just kind of the overall environment. All right. So where do we get our information in the EOC? So I hope you like this slide. It took me a while to put together. But there are a lot of information sources in the EOC, and they're sort of bombarding you all at once. So you can get information from your screen, you can get information from conversations, you can get information from your phone, you can get information from AV displays. There's pieces of paper put in front of you, like actual reports or just sticky notes. You know, there's random spreadsheets. Sometimes your phone alerts you. So the question for you guys as information architects is, how do you tame the pile? So how do you make sense of the pile? And that's really what we're going to talk about. And when we approach that, the first thing I want you to think about, when we do, every time we activate the EOC, we do an after action report. And so we've consistently gotten the same message back about what people's favorite way to receive information is. And I don't know, does anyone have any guesses about the favorite way? People say that the thing they got the most out of when the information presentation format. So it's like, I was trying to understand what was going on, and until this thing happened, I didn't really know.
Tempted to say face-to-face.
Yeah, specifically one kind of face-to-face, and it's the what we call the school circle. And this is a smaller one. This is actually from. Do you remember the? I think a couple of years ago, one of those duck amphibious vehicles lost its axle on Aurora and crashed into a bus. It was horrible. It actually happened when we were in the middle of a. It happened right after we were activated for a visit by the Chinese president, and we're just closing down that, and then this thing happened. Yeah. So we kind of sent the people home who didn't really need to be there, and then this is one of the initial assessments. But we call this a school circle. So why do you think people really like this format? Why do they get the most out of this?
Lots of perspectives and face-to-face.
Yeah. And why is that face-to-face really important?
Handshake interaction.
Yeah, you can see who is giving you the information. You know, if this is potentially a life or death situation, are you going to trust information coming over your screen from I don't know where, or are you going to, you know, trust like the chief of police or an assistant police chief who's reading you information off of their yellow pad? I think it's pretty self-evident. All right. So, but you know, how do you get to that school circle? What needs to take place before you have the school circle in order to provide the information in the school circle? What are the limitations of the school circle? And what happens after you're done? So that's really when you start needing to build a more complex information architecture, just in terms of data architectures, in terms of hardware, software, because there's a lot of work to get. I think of the school circle like the you know, the homepage for Google. You know, it just has Google and a search box, but there's a lot behind it. Don't they say simple is difficult or something like that at Google? So the limitations, what are some of the limitations of that, do you think? I mean, what happens if you're not in the room? What happens in a high tempo environment? This happens to us all the time. People were being really good there, but you know, what if I tell you we're going to have a briefing in 1 minute, and then you get a phone call, and this person is frantically trying to get some information from you, and so what are you going to do? Are you going to attend that? If you take the phone call, you lost all your situational awareness. So it has to be done verbally. It takes a while to go around the circle. That was a small one. There can be huge ones. And then when the meeting's done, we got to break up and do process actual work, and we'll need information to take away, and probably a lot more detailed information too. So before we get there, you know, these are some of the things that just have to take place. You know, there's a lot of work with the computer. You know, people are very intensely staring at their screens. You know, it's a high-stress environment. So there's a lot of talking on the phone and talking and looking at your screen, trying to multitask. There's a lot of impromptu stand-up meetings. It's funny, we have these exercises, and when you're doing them, they really feel real. You know, like this is a make-believe earthquake that we did, the same ones that Hans participated in. But yeah, I mean, those guys look like it's real, right? So there's more readings. This is actually from our logistics group, and the logistics are the people who try and find resources for us. So we were just talking about the need for building inspectors. You know, if we had a big earthquake and we had 10,000 damaged buildings and we have like 20 building inspectors, you know, how long does it take to do a building inspection? You know, you can kind of do the math, right? You're going to need more building inspectors. So this unit is the one that goes out and tries to find us more building inspectors. The major problem with emergency management is how do you get big fast, if you could boil it down into one thing. And a lot of times, you know, your traditional first responders, they have systems in place to do that. So if you're firefighters or police, they have mutual aid. You know, so when we run out of resources, we can call, you know, Bellevue Fire Department, and they'll bring some of their rigs over. But a lot of times in emergencies, we don't have systems in place to get big fast, and so we have to get creative. By the way, there was one thing with this group that they really struggled with. There was one change to a form where there was a change where we decided to adopt, you know, every jurisdiction had their own resource request process and form. And we thought, oh, it would be great, we'll all center around this one state system. And so all we need to do is just change this one field. We'll just change the values in the status column for the resource request. Oh man, and we didn't, you know, not a big change, right? You know, dollars to donuts, these people are having an in-depth discussion about what the values in that particular drop-down list meant. Yeah. So you have to be really careful about, training is a really big issue in emergency management. You just can't spring stuff on people. Okay, So we're talking about getting ready for a school circle. So we had people looking at the computers, talking on the phone, having stand-up meetings. Then now we're, this is pretty typical where you're getting ready for your briefing material. You have one person writing and you have 3 people around talking to the person writing all at the same time. Discussing what you're going to put into your report. And then finally you get your report, and even then, even after you got the final one, you'll probably still have some last minute changes. This is probably actually a policy recommendation. It might not be something for the school circle, or it could be, I don't know. We don't have a lot of metadata on this. Okay, and then you have to brief out. This is our director, Barb Graff. So she's briefing out a big school circle. And this is actually a bigger school circle. It's a little bit dim, but this is from this Seattle activated its EOC to deal with the homelessness crisis. And so this is kind of a unique one for us where we brought people in 2 hours every day. And so this is a brief out. But what's one difference for this school circle versus the other school circle? Or a couple of them.
Yeah, these are.
I mean, it's not rocket science, so I'm not trying to trick you guys.
Oh, there's many more people, I know.
Yeah, there's a lot more people. What else?
With technology.
Yeah, there's a map. There's a priority areas, which is, and then there are these side displays. So, already, it helps to have some technology to focus the group. So, where our problems are, and then a lot of times in actual activation, instead of a priority, well, this was an actual activation, but in a typical activation, these will be objectives. So you know what you're supposed to be working on, and where your resources are, and where your problems are. And that helps cement verbal presentations. Okay. All right. So one of the things, we have this chaotic work environment. One of the strategies we use to tame a chaotic work environment is to have a standardized set of products. And this is one where I'm not sure how much exposure you have to emergency management, but can we think of what some of those might be? Some of these are just things you'd want for any kind of a big group, and some of them are unique to emergency management. Well, you need a schedule. What else? Well, just in terms of, even if we don't have a computer, just products. Like, how do you know, like, kind of dim. I mean, how do you know who that guy is? Who's he? What's his phone number? What is he doing? He doesn't have a vest. I don't know. How about, that person or that person? So, you need a list of the people who are there. We also work with, we have the EOC, but Seattle Public Utilities has their departmental operations center, and police has their special operations center, and there are various dispatch centers, and hey, we're working with Washington State Transportation now. So contact list. We need a set of objectives. We need a situation map. So we have a lot of standardized reports. Not all of these, we have our WebEOC system, not all of these operate on top of our WebEOC system. as a WebEOC admin, I would love to see more of them on WebEOC, I think it would. But like, we do these things called Snapshot Reports. So we used to have a real problem with high-level executives, including and elected officials and mayors, constantly calling us, you know, like, what's going on, what's going on, what's going on? Which could be a distraction. You know, it's important that they get information because they're the face of our city. So you need to pump them with information. So we created a snapshot report which just tells you what has happened in the last hour. And we say we're going to just crank these out every hour, on the hour, so they know they're going to get, it's like a promise, they know they're going to get information. But we do this just in Word because we want an actual person to put this together. And we want that information to be handcrafted. It typically, in the UC, it takes 2 people to write a 1-page snapshot report permanently. So it takes, there's so much information in a high tempo environment. Someone has to, remember we saw that pile? There's one person who combs the pile for information and then basically dictates it to the person writing the report. I think maybe if we use WebEOC, we partially automate it, we might be able to get it down to 1, but probably not.
But TJ, the snapshot is always an update to the previous one, right?
Right.
It's not repetitive.
Right. The situation report is a summary of everything that's happened in the incident. So it's situation report, long, short. So it's a quick hit of information. So on the snapshot report, it'd be like, what's happened in the last hour, who's in the OC, you know, what's the weather like?
Do you have an example? Maybe not in this presentation, but I'm just curious because I'm trying to understand the difference and not getting bogged down with this.
Well, literally, so usually so situation report, everything that's happened to date, you know, it's 2 o'clock now, snapshot report, what's happened since 1 o'clock. We throw out the last one and start over. Okay, schedule, mission and objectives. Usually when we start with a generic set of objectives. It's really important to switch to one that's not generic. Maps, if it can't, gotta have maps and visualizations. I mean, people just can't imagine, put their minds around what's going on without that. But checklists, you know, I think there's a famous book, Checklist Manifesto. You know, I don't know about you. I mean, I get stressed out and instantly I start forgetting stuff. You know, stressful day. I can't tell you how many times I've locked myself out of the administrative part of our building because I was stressed out and ran out without my car key. So later we're going to talk about damage assessment. That's what we're working on right now. So what we found is over time, how we actually do business, you know, operate verbally is a little out of sync with our written and database products. And so that's one of the reasons why we're doing this big WebEOC redo. And so hopefully we'll be adding more of these into WebEOC and then making them fit our business processes a little bit better. All right. So the basic idea is that you have management structures in your information systems and they're mutually reinforcing. So that's the ideal world. But we know it's not an ideal world. So here are some of our, let's just walk through some of these challenges. So, I'm not sure how many of you guys are actually are here as members of the public and how many are in the information school. I don't know, from information school people, do these look like common problems or do they look like something you've never seen before? sort of a mix of some nodding heads, yeah. So, yeah, I don't think these are like, I don't think they're unique to emergency management. I mean, my background is in emergency management. But, like, when you know, this first bullet list, like, if you're the person sitting there trying to, you know, say, like, work with this database or spreadsheet data table of, you know, a couple thousand records, and you have to massage it into create a new query. You're working on updating a whole bunch of data in your data set, and you're the person trying to work, and then somebody's coming over and talking into your ear while you're trying to think of, you know, how you're going to structure your SQL update or something like that. You know, that's not an ideal work environment. Also, when you have an emergency, there's just a lot of data that comes out of the woodwork that you've never encountered before. So when we had the Aurora Bridge bus crash, you know, every time you have a disaster, you're always in a situation where it's like, God, who would have thunk that there was a tourist vehicle filled with a lot of visitors from outside of Seattle, many of whom are not from the US, would run into a bus full of international students, resulting in multiple fatalities involving people who aren't familiar, literally international students for whom it was their first day on campus and had no idea about how like emergencies work in the US, or even just how to get around or do anything about the city, really. They were on an orientation tour. I mean, who would have thought that, right? So all of a sudden, you know, you need to contact all these consulates and embassies, the Japanese embassy, the German embassy, the Austrian embassy, the British embassy, you know, the Chinese embassy, you know, the Vietnamese embassy and consulate, and, you know, and emergency responders, they just, you know, they want to get people to hospital as quickly as they can, so they just take them. So where did these people go? Some people just, you just been in a bus crash and you're okay, but you're okay physically, you might not be okay mentally, and you just walk off. So unlike an airplane, there's no manifest of who's on the bus. There was actually 3 buses, and so we got a list of the people who got on the bus at the North Seattle College, but then they all changed places. You know, you get on a bus, you want to sit next to your friend, you sit on another bus. So we didn't know who was where. So we had a big spreadsheet that was tracking patients, and to try and, because literally some of those parents for some of those kids had just gotten on planes to fly back to, say, China, and their kid's in a horrible crash while they're on a plane back to China, and now we're going to have to contact them so they can come back to the US. So imagine trying to deal with all that. We hadn't anticipated that in our WebEOC. And by the way, there's a lot of federal regulations around what kind of information a hospital can give out. So sometimes the hospitals, and they weren't even sure, so there's HIPAA, which is the law that governs this. The hospitals weren't even familiar with some of the details of the HIPAA regulations. So they tended to err on the side of not providing this information and being protective of their patient information. So it was really hard to get information to give to consulates and embassies. So imagine trying to integrate that and be cognizant of what what the regulations are, what you can and can't share with the public. Okay, so this is my big complaint slide. Any questions about anything on here? Okay. I'll just go through another one on the pet peeve. Flat files, man. I'm a GIS guy. I love data layers. And then, so constantly we're like, man, I want to get your data. Do you have your data? Yeah, it's like, yeah, we got GIS data for you. And then they give you like a PDF, you know, and so literally, like what we did in damage assessment, we'll get into this in just a sec, but, you know, we had people, we have multiple PhDs doing data entry in this exercise. And it's just crazy. Okay, all right, and we have a structural engineer, so this is great. This is an example. So, one, okay, if you're the fire department, so the first thing the fire department does is they do a windshield survey. So they drive around, and then because they want to triage the situation, and then they'll decide where to go. So, I'm not going to people don't need to talk, so you just hold it. So if you're the fire department, which one of these buildings would you send people to first? 1, 2, or 3? Show of hands. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, they're probably going to send people to 2 first. That's what they do. Okay. A little different question. And this is a little bit harder. This is hard. So if you're a building inspector, so are you going to go 1, 2, 3, or 4? Oh, I forgot to include 4. Sorry. 1, 2, 3, or 4. Building inspector. No, actually, surprisingly, you're probably going to send people there because this is the city's.
Oh, yeah.
It's a trick. Because I show you a picture. This is the EOC. So it's a critical facility, so you want to make sure all your critical facilities are working well. Then probably you'd send people, well, I don't know, engineer. I'm going off of what John Sue said. He had an interesting point, our chief building inspector. You don't send your building inspectors here because you know that's a red tag, right?
It's a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer. You already have fire guys. What I will say is you will, for the search and rescue teams,
That's 2.
you will need a structural engineer to keep people safe on the site. By the way, in an emergency, most of the people rescued in an earthquake are rescued by people nearby. So this happens and people are standing around. It's demonstrated. Mexico City, Christchurch, at great risk to themselves, will go in here and start pulling people out. So yeah, you will need structural engineers to advise urban search and rescue. But this building, I should have put one with crack. I was a little bit devious. This has major structural damage, and it's from, I think, from Wellington, I think. It's actually going to be taken down because of structural damage. But a lot of buildings don't look like they're, especially catastrophically damaged. But if this is a city of Seattle, if it's a response facility, you need inspectors there. We need to know if we can use that building. And then eventually you'll get to private damage. Okay, so these are some of the questions we want to ask about our damage assessment. So that one might seem like a no-brainer, like you want to know if the building's safe to go into, but are we, we just had a damage assessment discussion yesterday. So like if you're assessing, are you assessing the structural integrity of the building because you're worried about safety? Are you assessing it because you want to use the building, which may be different things? Are you assessing the property? Like let's say you have a parks or a school. Let's say a school with a gym. Gym's trashed, you can't use it, but you got a big field. Big fields are great to use in emergencies. You can land helicopters on them. You can put other, You can stage things in their parking lot, you can do all. So a lot of times we use a building tag as a shorthand for how that property is, but really it's kind of limited in focus, where it's just talking about the structural integrity of the building. You could have, I mean, we could have all the equipment in this room and the drop ceiling fall down in here and not be able to use this room, but the building is fine, you know? So then who's at the scene? So if you're assessing a property, you could have a structural engineer out there, fire department out there, police out there, power company out there, the water department out there, wastewater company out there, you could have human services out there, you could have Red Cross out there. You could have 10 different people doing evaluations of that building, and then you have to think about what information they're collecting it. Are they doing it on a piece of paper? Are they doing it with like a phone, you know, connected to a database? Then how do they get it from the scene? Are they just taking it with them on their spreadsheet? Are they taking their piece of paper back? Or are they using like a ArcGIS collector and it's going into a database? Then how do we synthesize all that data? We have 10 departments or organizations on site. How's it getting integrated? And did you think about that before your emergency? And then ultimately, you know, a lot of times I've seen data collected that really doesn't contribute to the response. So, okay. So here we go. Oh, did all those go away at once? Oh, there we go. So these are all examples of actual damage collection forms or postings that we have in, from our Cascadia Rising exercise. And I mentioned how we didn't want to send the building inspectors to the collapsed buildings. Guess what piece of data the mayor's office most wanted to know in our exercise? How many collapsed buildings do we have? So this is an official city building tag. Oh, I'm almost out of time. So, and you'll see one thing you'll notice here, languages, right? So there's new Washington State law that says we have to be able to issue emergency information to languages spoken by 1,000 people or more in the city of Seattle. So it's like 25. So how do you get, how do you do all this emergency information collection and then give the necessary public information out in 25 different languages? All right. So we got all those, literally we got multiple spreadsheets and pieces of paper and information dumps and post-its. And this is where we were trying to enter all this into our WebEOC system. This is a screenshot of our WebEOC system. And come up with a comprehensive damage survey. And this is where we had people re-entering information. So that came up through other systems. So, and that's something we want to improve on. There's also a couple of schools of thought. I find it really common when you're dealing with a lot of traditional like information management. It was like, we'll just, we'll do this big data collection effort and we'll collect all this detailed data and then we'll boil it down. But a lot of times that is a big data collection effort. And so, that you need to eventually know where all your damaged buildings are. But, if we're only a couple hours into an emergency, is it really important that we catalog each and every house and building and nonprofit that is damaged? Or is it more important just to get a swag and take multiple passes and sort of work from the top down? And eventually we'll start after collecting data, but from the bottom up. But we can't just rely on the bottom up data. So, but that's a challenge, is how do you marry those two, the top down, or we're just going to take a swag, you know, kind of put a big circle around an area, which we tried, but that has problems too. In say, you know, Ballard or the U District is a big emphasis area, or downtown or Pioneer Square. We also found that quickly it got confusing. So somehow we need a top-down and a bottom-up information strategy. And then eventually it has to go onto a map. This is a map from that. So you can see what I mean. We were just trying to create circles around areas and say there's a whole bunch of problems in here, but then, you know, there's one circle that means building damage, there's another area we want to show that has a power outage, another area that has low water pressure, another area might have fires. So, you know, you get multiple overlapping polygons and it gets really confusing. Okay. So,
TJ, before you go,
yeah.
I just want to share one little anecdote from this exercise. When I was sitting there in the damage assessment unit producing the report from the map, I got, for one bridge, I got the information the bridge is down. And a few workplaces away from me were the ArcGIS people. And I said, I see this bridge is down here on my map, and in the report, can you confirm that? And I said, no, this thing is not down. So it went for 10 minutes, you know. I got another report, the bridge is down. Then they said, no, we don't see it here. Finally, it took me walking across to Seattle Department of Transportation, and they confirmed my bridge is not down. You know? So sometimes it takes that effort to deconflict information, you know, and to come up with a precise and vetted damage assessment report.
Yep, and that's where we get into the people with different colored vests talking to each other. Okay, so this is just, I thought, you know, this is a graduate level seminar. I have to, you know, I wanted to make it practical because I know when I was in graduate school, I just wanted to, it was like, give me the skills so I can, you know, get a job. I was a, you know, I did liberal arts, so it's just like, I've had not too much just thinking about stuff. But you know, I do, you know, there's no one answer to this, so I just want you to think, what's the most precious resource in a crisis? You know, maybe we can talk about this later. And then, how is that contributing to or detracting from the information systems you built? How is it contributing or detracting from that? And then with that, so there. So yeah. So this is from Cascadian. So thanks a lot, Hans, for inviting me. So with that, I don't know if there's time for questions.
Oh, absolutely, right.
Okay. So yeah.
So thank you.
Back there and then there.
So in your drills, do you think about loss of cellular communication networks and what, if you would even have these, or internet, how would those communicate?
Yes, we do. Because it's, you know, every time you guys have every time there's a football game down here, there's a loss of cellular network down there. Yeah, I mean, Seahawks Victory Parade and the first Women's March were, you know, they just got clogged up. I mean, everyone's streaming video and it just went down. So we have multiple communications pathways, but then we also practice doing stuff on paper.
What about if you use internet?
Yeah, we do. I mean, it really limits what we can do, but we do stuff on paper, and we really could rely on runners, or if our facility loses communications for a long enough period of time, we might even consider moving somewhere else that does have communications, or we have we would bring in a resource that could provide us the communications, like a, either a mobile cell tower or satellite communications or something like that. But there, you're looking at a huge bandwidth hit. One of the attractions for using WebEOC, like if you're running a paper system, it gets super messy because you're trying to do all these messaging forms and you're filling out stuff in triplicate and it goes out to 3 different people and then they route it to somebody else and then nobody knows where it's gone,
Did you say the satellite and the mobile is expensive? Is that the
Well, it is
problem?
expensive, and we have satellite phones, and we have amateur radio. It's like our communication systems of last resort, and last resort, not last resort. And they can actually do data over their networks.
It's slow, but it's...
It's slow, but it gets there. You had a question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask about the WebEOC software that you're using.
Yeah.
Is that replacing something that you used to use, or is it replacing a paper system? And then how integral or core is that to an activation operation if you didn't have it?
Yeah, it's very integral. So this is just another screenshot. We've had WebEOC since 2005, and it's mainly it's a system you access on a desktop. You can do push-outs onto a phone, but it's sort of more one-way. So a lot of the so it'd be great if you could do more with mobile technology. Like I'm very envious of the state of Texas because their state agency has like, is it 3 or 4 developers just working on WebEOC, and so they manage they created a custom-built native iPhone and Droid app to interface with WebEOC for managing their shelters. So like in Texas, if you're going into a shelter so they can track you, they create a barcode, scan it into WebEOC and put you on a bus so they get a manifest of who's on that bus. Because if you remember, after an evacuation they had a couple of years ago, there was an accident and people died during the evacuation. So that they need to improve their game on their transportation. We are not there yet. So yeah, it's very, very core. So when I talked about revising it, it's just, these are forms within WebEOC, and so we want to take a look at our business processes and realign our forms in WebEOC to those business processes. And paper is complementary too, because we usually, so sometimes we'll develop a paper or abstract set of business processes, and then tweak them to make them more fit an electronic system, and then implement it in WebEOC.
Is it just the personnel in the EOC that can use it, or do your partner agencies like the fire department or the police departments, are they able to see this information as well?
It's outside, it's in the city's DMZ, because we want non-city partners to be able to access it.
There's one problem with the system that I have discovered using it, and that is, it is fantastic logging everything. But as an incident unfolds, the logging information becomes so overwhelming that you cannot see the forest for the trees, and you can write fantastic after-action reports from the log, but in the concrete situation, you sometimes chase for the information that you're looking for.
Yeah, so you see, like, a lot of it is, it's very text heavy. One of the things we hope to get is there a way to rely more on visualizations? So that's one of the things we're looking at.
Well, if I may, one other thing that is from a practical standpoint. So let's say you're looking for some information in this right column there. While you're looking for that, other people, I mean, the room is full, you saw that, put in information. So you're constantly also chasing, you know, where you're looking, because it changes all the
You
time.
can, yeah, you can disable the refresh,
Yeah.
but yeah, if you don't disable it, stuff will keep popping up. I mean, these fields work too, but training is always a constant issue as well. But that's one of our big after action items is people say, I couldn't find the information I was looking for in here. So, all right, more questions? Comments?
The integration of WebEOC, you know, is this already version 8 or is that still?
Yeah.
Okay. So we talked about the integration between ArcGIS and WebEOC, and I know that is still not done, right? Can you?
Well, we just bought the vendor's mapping plugin, which was actually built by or in partnership with Esri.
Okay.
And we had a GIS analyst who created a cool information architecture for exchanging information through ArcGIS Online, which a lot of business systems now, so if you're building some sort of business system that does like work management, you know, your forte isn't mapping, so, you know, you work with Esri, that's what they do, and, you know, you integrate with Esri's platform. So it's pretty cool is that Esri's ArcGIS Online platform is becoming like a de facto middleware, because so you can send information into ArcGIS Online and then consume it with another business system. So that's a very cool prospect.
Right. Another question that may be of interest is, there are so many sites that use WebEOC. For example, the state is using it, and during Cascadia Rising, what we found, WebEOC crashed because it couldn't handle the number of concurrent users. Also, if you go a level up to FEMA, who are also using it, FEMA is very anxious to open up their systems via the network because they don't want to be hacked. So you cannot exchange data easily. These are some of the situations. I mean, you have all the information in here. Now you want to pass it on to the county, or the county wants to pass it on to the state, and you run into some of those issues and the bottlenecks. And I guess that is still a big issue, right?
Oh, yeah, but yes. Well, yes and no. We have, the state has, there's a product they have called Web Fusion, which allows you to connect instances. So one of the problems we encountered were resource requests, because this is when you need something. In this case, well, this is actually this is a real one from Aurora Bridge. It's like cell phones for families who are coming back. Families of victims. Is that the county at this point, at that time, wasn't using WebEOC, so we had to enter into our system and then re-enter it into their system. With Web Fusion, you can get two instances talking to each other. So they just bought theirs and got their system set up like 2 months ago. So it's on the drawing board to connect those and then connect into the state. So that's in the pipeline. Yes?
Just wanted to ask, in the satellite, we've all heard a lot about cell phones going down, and then you have radios that, of course, can continue to communicate. From a satellite perspective, how bad is the bandwidth issues for the EOC to communicate up to the satellite? So myself with a maybe
out of the box, or what we have capability without doing a resource request for is very limited. It's pretty much a couple of lines of voice.
Yeah.
You know, so that's what, we have 2 satellite phones in our EOC. So we would have to go out and bring in resources if we had to rely on satellite. So that's why we lean more heavily on our amateur radios people because we have a lot of those resources, a lot more of them. They're with the plans, I think there's like 150 active volunteers in that group. And the plan is for them to spread out into community emergency hubs and then relay information into the EOC. Or we could relay information back out through those people. So that's sort of the backup plan. And then they could bridge us until we could bring in more bandwidth. Some of those satellite resources are really expensive. And they want money to, and then it's how much money do you have to, because if you want to specify through a service level agreement, they're going to be here in an hour, that basically means you have to have like a satellite truck on standby just for your jurisdiction, which is expensive.
So with the community hubs you mentioned, I know the city had designated P patches as
Yes.
community hubs. Is that what you're talking
Yeah.
about? Or are there certain places that have equipment is there a difference between places that have equipment that folks can communicate from? Do they bring their equipment to the P patches?
Yeah, they bring it to there. A lot of these guys have mobile rigs and can operate out of their car. And they're very active in testing the capability too.
Yeah, seeing the ham radio operators as the backup has one limitation, and the big one, we will be out of power for an extended period of time. Estimates range between 3 months and 6 months. And then the question becomes how many of the ham operators do have power backups that are sufficient to cover that for an extended period of time. And so the backup is a backup for the normal incident, but not for the really big one.
Yeah, you don't want to end up like Puerto Rico. But the REOC, yeah, fuel, the city has a whole fuel plan that's one of our things we have to plan for too. And then most of the fuel comes into our area through Harbor Island, which is also susceptible to earthquake damage. So.
Okay.
All right.